Good morning. So I just like to get to know the audience a little bit first. How many are you or faculty members wanting to spend something out from your school? Show of hands. How many are graduate students wanting to spend something out? A few. How many would like to be in a startup that's doing some cool stuff? Okay. So what I'm going to talk to you about is just commercialization in general. And first I want to give you a little of my background. So which mic am I on? Is it this one here? Or this one? Podium. Okay, sorry. I won't walk around then. So I've been in hardware startups since 1985, and mainly in the world of semiconductors. And so I'm just doing this for a lot of times. You know, what my resume says is that you know how to do startups. That's what I do these days. And even though I had a technical degree to start with, it's been a lot of my career in product marketing activities and general management. So I left the engineering side fairly early in my career. In technology companies, often product marketing people are selling to engineer types folks, so having an engineering background is good. So up until this last company, I've never done a university spin out, and so I'm going to talk to you about, in general, what it's like to do a startup and what it's like how it's different doing a university spin out. And the technology that we've licensed is called compressive sensing imaging. We licensed that from Rice University. So just two short slides on the company. InView is building infrared cameras. Oh, this is on a timer, I bet. Or, yes, this is interesting. We'll see if the whole thing goes this way. But these infrared cameras have a lot of applications that are very interesting, things that a visual camera can't do. Seeing through fog, seeing through fire, doing inspection work. And the basic problem is that these are very high-cost cameras. In the shortwave infrared today, the cameras cost $55,000, and so they really haven't been deployed very widely. And so, just to give you a brief, again, introduction to what we're doing, normally in a camera you have a focal plane array where you have a diode detector per pixel, and in shortwave you end up using something like indium gallium arsenide as your detector material. Very expensive, hard to scale up, hard to get high pixel counts. So you go buy a camera for $55,000, that's 1 megapixel. Now, if you go to Best Buy and buy a visual camera, you can get 12 megapixels for $120. So it's a little different equation here: $55,000 for 1 megapixel. And so what we do something different here, in that we have a TI micromirror device. We have a single diode instead of a focal plane array of multiple diodes. There's one diode per camera, not one diode per pixel. And then we have some very interesting mathematics that came out of the West Coast universities called compressive sensing that says we can sub-Nyquist sample sparse images and reconstruct them with fidelity. So we will modulate the pattern of mirrors on this TI DLP, and in the first instance reflect half the light down to a single diode detector, take a reading, that's one reading here. We reconfigure the mirrors and redirect a different half of the light of the image down, take another reading, and say after 80,000, 100,000 readings we know enough to reconstruct a megapixel image. So the basic theory of compressive sensing for shortwave cameras is that the very expensive focal plane array gets replaced by a low-cost TI DLP and a low-cost diode and some processing. So that's the deal that we licensed. So that's just to give you a little feeling for where we are today. I'm going to change gears and talk some about doing startups. So when you go raise money from the venture folks, what do they care about most? Well, it's really these three large bullets here. The team is very important to venture investors, because they know a mature, experienced team will find their way through the minefields of doing a startup. And often the technology the startup finally commercializes isn't exactly what they started with, because they've learned along the way what the real competition is like, what the shortcomings of the technology are, what the real market opportunities are. So having an experienced team that knows how to run a business, make a business successful, is very important to the venture folks. Obviously having a large addressable market is important also, because venture guys want to make a lot of money. The popular thing these days, of course, is all the social networking and the internet kind of plays, where they can get a huge return on their investments. And at the very least, the venture firm is going to want to see a 10-1 return. They put $1 million in, they want at least $10 million back. And that's the nominal case. What they're looking for is somewhere in their portfolio of investments having the Facebook or the or some big winner that really drives their returns. And of course, the technology is important too. And the key word I want to emphasize here is having a sustainable advantage, meaning that over a period of 5 or 10 years, there's some reason why you can continue to be successful in the marketplace. So, being first to market with some technology that's not well protected means that someone else who has more resources than you can come in and do the same thing a year or two behind you. That's not a sustainable advantage. Now, sometimes sustainable advantages actually come in the business model, or in the case of Facebook, because they have how many millions of users. That gives them a sustainable advantage. No one else can come in and capture that many users. So there's a lot of reasons you have a sustainable advantage, but for most technology companies, it relates to the technology and how well it's protected. So that's what a conventional startup is all about when you think about going to raise money from a venture group. The university has a little more complication than that because there's other topics here. One of the things about most university technology, and when you go around, well, let me back up. When I sold my last company, I went to a program at the University of Texas at Austin where they brought in 9 former CEOs for 6 months. We went and met with 50 different professors trolling for technology. And the thing that was clear was that almost all the technology results were too early to be really commercializable. Universities get paid to do basic research. They do a really good job of that. And there's a lot of steps between basic research results and selling a product to a customer. And so one of the real questions is, how mature is the technology? If you're thinking about spinning technology out, how long is it really going to take you to get to where people are paying you millions of dollars a year?
And welcome to the final day of the Clio Expo 2012. The hall is now open. Today's poster session will begin at 11:30, and the technology transfer program is already in progress in the back of Hall 2.
The other
exhibitors, please visit the exhibitor lounge, which is sponsored by Physics Today, and students should visit the Newport Student Lounge back by the concession stand in Hall 2. And there's still time to win a new iPad. Just stop by the OSA and the IEEE Photonics Society booth out in the lobby for details about the technology playground. Enjoy the show, and remember that photography and videotaping are not allowed on the floor. Thanks.
Since most universities get a lot of funding from the federal government for their research, Eugene mentioned this also, there's government data rights. So depending on your technology, you may find that even though you have an exclusive license, that the government can go take that technology and use it for their own purposes with some of your competitors potentially. So that's another thing to consider in terms of what market you're trying to address and how is that technology going to play out. Now often, since you're the experts in the technology, no one else will really try to go there because they don't have the expertise to capitalize on it. But the data rights do exist. And you have additional kind of financial burden of the license fees and royalties impact your financial model. And then the last thing, if you're coming in from the entrepreneur side and not the technologist side, is you need to qualify not just the market and the technology, but you need to qualify the professor and the academic team. Is this someone who, if you're going to be the entrepreneurial CEO, who understands where their role starts and stops? Professors are very smart, and they tend to live in worlds where they get tenure and they have their own little fiefdoms. In the real world, they need to be flexible dealing with a startup because there's a lot of things they don't understand about businesses. And so as a founding CEO, one of the things to consider is this someone I can work with and who'll be flexible and will listen to me on the business side? So I've kind of covered some of this again, but this is, if you're thinking about writing a business plan and going out and trying to get funding, here's your checklist. I mentioned the team already. Is this a team that has enough balance of engineering and marketing and sales and finance experience to pull it off? Is there a large market? Is there a real obvious benefit to customers? Because ultimately, if you want to raise money from investors, the investors will say, well, let me talk to some referenceable customers who will give me a positive reference for your technology. So you need to be at the point where you have some customers pre-sold on this technology, and they'll say, I got to have this because there's no way I can solve this problem without this new technology. The competitive advantage I talked about, the competitive threat is certainly you want to have an acceptable competitive threat. Every startup has a competitor. If you don't think you have a competitor, it means you don't really understand your markets well. And being able to have a financial plan that's convincing that you can get profitable on a reasonable amount of capital and a reasonable amount of time. And so when you look at this list and think about doing your own startup, if there's things on here that you don't know how to do, go find complementary team members who can help build out your team, who can give you some confidence you can go talk to all these areas well. So it's going to take you a long time, maybe, to get first funding. I have 12 to 24 months here. And when you see some technology, the first thing you need to do is not only evaluate the technology, but the market for it. And you have to decide, is this something I really can sell? Who will buy this? I want to go talk to some of those people and see how interested they are in buying this from me if I produce this and commercialize it. If you haven't done that first step, you probably shouldn't be licensing the technology. And then it can take anywhere, depending on the schools, 4 to 12 months to get through that whole negotiation to get the license in place. Now you have a license and you have some customers interested, and it can take you then 6 to 12 months to go raise your initial funding so you can start hiring employee number 2. So you may be working here for 24 months without income to get the company to the point where it's funded. In the case of InView, it was 18 months, and that was with a very experienced founding team. So if you can bootstrap a company, that's the way to go, meaning that you don't raise outside funding. What you need to do if you do raise money is make sure you raise enough money. It's nice to think I can not raise too much money and I can own more of the company, but most venture firms will raise a $300 million, $600 million fund, and they'll make maybe 30 to 60 investments out of that fund. So each company they invest in, they want to put in $10 million over the life of that company, maybe in multiple rounds of financing. And if you only want to raise $500,000 or $1 million, and later on you'll need $1 million more, you've taken most of the large major VCs off the table, and you're kind of into the angel camp. That's not necessarily bad, but you need to get enough money on your first round of financing so that you have some really cool, some kind of results to show before you go out and raise your next round of financing. It could be prototypes. It could be some customer traction. It could be first revenue. If it's a software startup, you better have revenue before you raise second money. And it can be hard. I've spent a year raising my Series B. And for a CEO, you probably spend 60-70% of your time fundraising in a startup company. And raising less money can be harder than raising more. So, in summary, may you live in interesting times. If you decide to do a startup, your life will be very interesting.